Wisdom verses of the fundamental wisdom verses of the Middle Way by Nagarjuna. And then homage to the Gautama, who moved by his compassion toward the sacred Dharma to rid us of all views. So as we discussed the last 2 days, as Buddhist practitioners, our ultimate aim is, just as the Buddha has attained enlightenment comprised of the realization and true cessation. So on the one hand, we should develop that of the altruistic intention or spirit of enlightenment, which is complemented by the wish to help others and also the intention to become enlightened. And Nagarjuna has said that what is enlightenment is the main objective of enlightened Buddhahood is to serve other sentient beings, and therefore for the benefit of all sentient beings as infinite as the expanse of space. In order to serve them, you intend to become a fully enlightened being, to reach that enlightenment. And in order to reach it, of course, within that Buddhahood, you have the form body for serving others, and then there is the Dharmakaya, which fulfills one's own interests. And so these two holy bodies, the Buddha form body and the Dharma body, arise from the accumulation of merit and accumulation of method, and so these two are the means to attain those two Buddha bodies, merit and wisdom. So you cultivate bodhicitta with the help of love and compassion, loving kindness, or affectionate love and compassion. So, accordingly, having generated bodhicitta, then you also engage in the bodhisattva practices comprising of the 6 perfections, such as generosity. And within that generosity, practice of generosity, you have the generosity of giving material things and giving social service, and also helping people in danger, so saving others from danger, which is termed as giving fearlessness. And then there's giving of dharma. It doesn't mean that you go around give teaching to people as such, but in order to help others to develop wisdom, which sees things, what is right from wrong. I mean, you should have the intention to cultivate it, and then also aspire to share it with others. And then, therefore, through one's practice of generosity, what you reach is that perfection of giving or generosity. Of course, at this stage, we cannot have that perfection of giving as such. But as much as we can, we should think of helping and benefiting others. And so similarly, it is the case with the practice of morality, patience, joyous effort, concentration. And so through these practices of these 5 perfections, then one accumulates that of merit. And then with regard to the wisdom, you could develop the wisdom, understanding those of the nature of impermanence and so forth, which are the 16 aspects or characteristics of the Four Noble Truths. And so in this, and then you also could develop the wisdom of selflessness and so forth. And then by combining these two, the merit and wisdom, you could attain the two Buddha bodies, those of the Rupakaya and Dharmakaya. So tomorrow is our final day of the teaching this time. And therefore, we'll do the bodhicitta ceremony as well, based on ritual. And so today, we'll continue with the teaching of Buddhapalita, where we left yesterday. We are on chapter number 2, page 19, in English. So I'll go through Buddhapalita. Maybe first we should say the blessing for tea. Inconceivable is the qualities of the Buddha, inconceivable the qualities of Dharma, and inconceivable are the Sangha. And keeping faith in inconceivables has inconceivable fruit. And I make offering of this tea and bread to the inconceivable ones. What's
this is from Todd for you.
Oh.
Is it? Distilled coffee. Distilled what? Coffee. It's strong.
So chapter chapter 2, examination of coming and going. Objection or critique. Through your clear presentation of the logic of non-arising, my mind experience is always filled with amazement to listen to emptiness. But how could the world's perception of coming and going be untenable? I respond, first, there is no going where one has gone. Also, there is no going where one has not gone. If one... So if going existed, then the question that arises is whether going exists where one has gone or where one has not gone, then first there is no going where one has gone, because the action of going is already past. So when you try to analyze going or the gone and so forth, in this way you cannot find anything. Also, there is no going where one has not gone, because the action of going has not yet commenced. And then a critique. It is just so. Indeed, going does not exist where one has already gone and where one has not yet gone. However, going exists on that being gone over. And the response, apart from where one has gone and where one has not gone, there's the being gone over is unintelligible or cannot be conceived. Apart from where one has gone and where one has not gone, how can that being gone over exist? This is unintelligible. How? Stating this is unintelligible is tantamount to stating it is untenable since it is not apprehended. Thus, apart from where one has gone and where one has gone, that being gone over is not apprehended at all, and thus it is untenable. Therefore, going does not exist since that being gone over does not exist in the least. So objection 8 exists just on that being gone over, because going exists there. How? Where there is movement, there is going. Further, one's movement exists on that being gone over, and it does not exist where one has gone or not gone. Therefore, going exists on that being gone over. So going, the process of going or taking a step, does not exist. In your proof establishing the non-existence of going, you taught or you showed in verse number 1 that the action of going is already past and not yet commenced. Therefore, where there is movement, there is no going. There is going, and that movement is observed. Further, once movement exists on that being gone over. How could it be tenable that there is going on that being gone over? When there is no going, then that being gone over is not tenable. Here, you say going exists on that being gone over. For you assert that which possesses going goes on that being gone over. But the action of going constitutes a single action, and since for you the action of going is connected with that being gone over, therefore it follows there is no going when going is not connected with the action of going. But this also is untenable, for how could there be going in that way when going does not exist? So when you talk about going or gone, you have to talk in relation to an actor, the one who goes, and therefore this would also be there would be logical fallacy. If it follows that going is twofold, then the goer also would be twofold. Why? Because on page 21, because going is not tenable when there is no goer. It follows that going is twofold. Then if it follows that going is twofold, then it follows that the goer also would be twofold. Why? Because going is not tenable when there is no goer. Because if the goer exists, going also exists. And if the goer is rejected, then going does not exist. Therefore, it follows that if going is twofold, the goer is in consequence would also be twofold, but this also is unacceptable. Therefore, since many faults would arise, there is no going. There is no going on that being gone over, because it is untenable to go where one has gone. If there were no goer, going would not be tenable. It has already been demonstrated that if there were no goer, going would not be tenable. But if going were not tenable, since there were no goer, what going would depend on the goer, and what going would pertain to the goer. An objection, we do not say that there is another going that pertains to the goer. To the goer that is distinct from the goer, we do say those who possess going are called goers, and they exist. And the response, the Master says, if there is no going, how could there be a goer? So objection, and then the response, and then the verse after that. Therefore, the goes is not established. Why? Because it is untenable. How? First, how could it be tenable to say the goer goes? When going does not exist, the goer is not tenable at all. When it is said the goer goes, just a single action of going exists. Since that action of going is clearly connected with goes, the goer is not connected with going. Thus, it follows that goer is merely a name, just like the names of Gutta and Chaitra, but this also is not acceptable. Therefore, when going does not exist and the goer is not tenable at all, at that time, how could it be tenable to say the goer goes? The Master gives a further response for any who take the position that the goer goes. It follows he is a goer without going, because you assert the goer goes. You may think it is unsuitable for any to take this position, for such a fault would arise, and you may think a goer goes since he possesses going. But since the term goer is clearly connected with the action, it follows action of going, it follows he is goer without going. And because you assert the goer goes, then it follows that this would mean the goer without going. But this is untenable, for how could one who goes be without going? But if you think it is unsuitable that such a fault arises, you assert that both the goer and the goes possess going. Then also this error arises, and it is stated, if the goer goes, it follows that going would be twofold: that by which he actually becomes a goer, and that by which goes, having become a goer. So if one imagines the goer who possesses going goes, then it follows that going would be twofold. And going by which he actually becomes a goer, when he possesses it, and the going in reliance upon which he goes. But it is untenable that going is twofold. If it follows that going were twofold, then as before, it would also follow that the goer would be twofold. But since there is also unacceptable, it is thus untenable to say the goer goes. So please read on. For third person other than the goer or non-goer goes. Therefore, how could it be untenable that a third person that is other than the goer, non-goer, or the goer or non-goer goes? That being so, because such a person is utterly non-existent, neither the goer nor the goer also go. Thus, because of that, it is untenable to say the goer, the non-goer, the goer, and the non-goer go. Therefore, to say he goes is not actually established. If that referred to in the statement the goer does not exist, he goes does not exist, how could going be actually established? So the reasonings that are the process of reasoning basically are same. So are you walking about while rising into the sky? At that time, before the commencement of going, there is no commencement of going on that being gone over and where one has gone. At that time, while resting before the commencement of going, there is no commencement of going on that being gone over or where one has gone as well. If there is no commencement of going, how could there be one who possesses going on that being gone over? If one who possesses going does not exist, how could there be going that has been completed? And then the critic, where one has not gone exists, for there is a commencement of going. Where one has not gone exists, before there is a commencement of going. And the response, how could there be going where one has not yet gone? Here, any place where one is resting and not yet moving, demarcates where one has not yet gone, for one has not commenced to go there yet. When one moves, then at that time, when one commences to move there, it is no longer where one has not yet gone. But at that time, when it is where one has not yet gone, there is no movement there. That being so, how could there be a commencement of going where one has not gone? We should examine this as follows. When the commencement of going is not observed anywhere, how can where one has gone, that being gone over, and where one has not gone be imagined? When the commencement of going does is not observed anywhere, at that time, how can one imagine where one has gone, that being gone over, and where one has not gone? First, where one has not gone exists. Do you grieve because of your unborn son's death? Or do you consider the non-existence of where one has gone to be where one has not gone? Here, if the opposite of where one has gone is where one has not gone, and where one has gone does not exist, how for you could where one has gone exist? An objection: if where one has gone does not exist, since its opposite does not exist, therefore going is established. Why? Because a state incompatible with it exists. Thus, resting, which is incompatible with going, exists. Therefore, because that which is incompatible with resting exists, going exists. It may be asked that if resting exists, wouldn't going also exist? But since resting is untenable, how could going exist? In what way? If resting were to exist, is it the goer or non-goer who rests? First, the goer does not rest, and the non-goer does not rest. How could a third person, other than the goer or non-goer, rest? Thus, resting is surely non-existent. Why? Because it is untenable. How is that? First, how could it be tenable to say the goer rests? When there is no going, the goer is not tenable. Since someone becomes a goer by possessing the action of going, when there is no going, the goer is not tenable. If the opposite of going is also called resting, then going and resting are incompatible, and these two do not abide together as one. Because of that, how could it be tenable to say the goer rests? And the goer also does not rest. Why? Because his going does not exist. If the opposite of going is called resting, then the non-goer would rest because he is devoid of going. But how does he rest? If the resting of non-goer were also considered to be resting, it would follow that resting would be twofold. Also, it would follow that one resting would be twofold. Therefore, because of that, the non-goer also does not rest. But if you think that the goer and non-goer rest, then since the going cannot be tenable, therefore the resting also cannot be tenable. How could a third person other than the goer and non-goer rest? What third person other than the goer and non-goer can be considered to be resting? Thus, because a third person does not exist in the least, so too neither the goer nor the non-goer rest. Moreover, that which is opposite of going is called resting, and if the goer stops, would he stop on that being gone over, where one has gone, or where one has not gone? In that regard, the goer does not stop while on that being gone over, on where one has gone, or where one has not gone. The goer does not rest while on that being gone over. Why? Something is that being gone over because it possesses going. And since the opposite of going is resting and going are incompatible, therefore it is impossible that these two are the same. Therefore, because of that, first, the goer does not stop on that being gone over. Also, the goer does not rest on where one has gone and where one has not gone. Why? Because the goer would be devoid of going. Thus, if the opposite of going and resting and going does not, going is resting and going does not exist where one has gone and not gone, then if going does not exist, how could stopping exist? How could resting exist if the stopping of going did not exist? That being so, resting does not exist on where one has gone or where one has not gone. As with going, beginning and also stopping are similar to going. For that reason, does the goer not rest? It is because both resting and going are incompatible. Similarly, for that reason, for what reason does the one resting not go? It is because both resting and going are incompatible. For what reason does the non-goer rest? It is because it follows that resting would be twofold. Similarly, for what reason does the one not resting also not go? It is because it would be twofold. It would follow that going would be twofold. For what reason does the goer and the non-goer not rest? It has already been explained, because it is impossible. Similarly, for that what reason? Sri Solomon says he lost where he was because of sneezing. Similarly, for what reason does the one resting and the one not resting not go? It is because it is impossible. Thus, first, the resting of the goer and the going of the one resting are similar. Now, just as it was said that the commencement of going, where one has gone, where one has not gone, and on that being gone over is untenable, so too the beginning of the resting is untenable on where one has rested, where one has not rested, and where one is resting. Thus, the commencement of going and also the beginning of resting are similar. Now, just as it is stated in the stopping going is not stopping, where one has gone, where one has not gone, and that being gone over, so too stopping resting is not going from where one is resting, because going does not exist. It is also not going from where one is not resting, because going does not exist. It is also not going from where one is resting, because resting and going are not compatible. Thus the stopping of going and the stopping resting are similar. Objection. Though it cannot be said going, beginning, and stopping exists where one has gone, where one has not gone, or on that being gone over, or that the goer, the non-goer, and that other than those exist, still Chaitra is called a goer, due to seeing Chaitra walk, because for that reason the goer and going exist. Response. First, this is a confused statement that should not have been uttered. However, if the thought that Chaitra is a goer arises from seeing Chaitra walk, then when Chaitra stops walking, is stopping walking and Chaitra the same or different? The Master says, to say that going and the goer are the same is not correct. To say that going and the goer are different is not correct. How is that? If going itself is the goer, then it follows that the agent and also the action are the same. If going itself is the goer, then it follows that the agent and also the action are the same. This is untenable. How could that which is the agent be the action? But if you think it is unsuitable that such an error arises for both the agent and the action, arises for both the agent and action are different, then the Master explains, if you imagine going and the goer to be different, there would be going without a goer and a goer with going. If you see the error in both the agent and the action being the same, and imagine the goer and the going to be different, then going that is distinct from the goer would be baseless and self-established. If going was baseless and self-established, then the goer also would be devoid of going, not reliant on going and self-established. But these two alternatives are completely untenable. How could there be a goer without going and going without a goer? Objection. Do you restrain the murderer alone, but not the act of murder? We do not assert that both the agent and the action are different because they are not established as distinct. Also, we do not assert them to be the same because the action is distinct from the agent. Therefore, because of that, both the agent and the action are established, even though their being the same or different does not exist. And the response is, we do not restrain the murderer alone. Would you extend your hands and vigorously move them while exhaling as you swim in the waters of a mirage? Or would you maintain the view that things exist except for sameness and otherness, which are non-existent states? If they are not established as the same phenomenon or different phenomena, how could these two be established? If both the agent and the action are not established as the same phenomenon and or different phenomena, how could these two be established by something other than these two? Thus, they are mere mental fabrications. So how could this object of mundane worldly perception be suppressed by concealing it? One is non-goer due to being devoid of going, and one is a goer through relying on going. That being is one who goes, and further, that being is called a goer. In desiring a son, would you cohabit with a neuter? Or do you consider a non-existent goer to be a goer? In that case, if that to be gone to, that is this destination, exists, it is suitable to imagine a goer. But even when a goer is imagined, that to be gone is untenable. Therefore, at that time, since conceiving this is harmful, what use is it? But if you ask, how could that to be gone to, or the destination be untenable, then it has already been shown that where one has gone, where one has not gone, and that being gone over are unintelligible. But if you think that since he goes in just those ways, he is the goer, then equally, since he does not go in those ways, therefore imagining him to be the goer is pointless. Objection. Since he is a goer, the going itself goes. For example, speaking speaks, or actions act. Response. But if you consider the going of the goer, then what going goes as that goer, or what other than that goes? Neither are untenable. Why is that? That going by which he becomes a goer is not the going of that goer. That going by which Kshetra comes to be called a goer, when he possesses that going, is not the act of going of that goer. Why is that? For the reason that there is no goer prior to someone going somewhere. For the reason that prior to that going, that is, the going by which someone becomes a goer, there is no prior goer who exists before such going. Because the goer alone possesses that going, he is called a goer. If someone were to go somewhere, like a town or city, then going and the goer would be distinct. Therefore, that going, that is the going by which he becomes a goer, is not distinct from the goer, like it's a town or city. Thus, first, the action of going, by the action of going, he becomes a goer. But that going is not the going of the goer. But if you think that something other than that goes, then that going by which is different from that by which he becomes a goer is not the going of that goer. Also, that going by which is different from that by which Kshetra comes to be called a goer, when he possesses that going, is not the act of going of that goer. For what reason? The Master said, for the reason that two goings are untenable when just one goes. For reason that two goings, that by which one becomes a goer and that which goes, having become a goer, are untenable when just one goes, and so forth. So he's almost finished, second chapter. So of course we have these notions. Of course we will say that of course I exist, I go, I sit, and so rest, and so forth. So when you talk about going, you are not saying you went, and you are not saying you are going to go. And you are going is a reference to the present, but half of that time is past and half yet to come. And therefore, the present itself that you refer to by the going does not exist. So, when we don't do any kind of analysis into this kind of reality or nature of things, of course the going is that. There, but when you do when you do this analysis, then the going and the goer and the crossing over and so forth do not exist. So, of course, to our mind, when we think about the going, the action of going, and the goer and so forth comes to our mind, we have this notion as if these actions, the process of going and so forth, have their own independent, distinct or independent existence. And therefore, we grasp at that kind of existence, and accordingly, we have the negative emotions of attachment, anger, and so forth arise in us, and then we indulge in negative actions of killing and so forth of other beings. And so in this text, for example, you come across the expression, not that, not this, and so forth. And so all this must be understood in terms of how things do not exist in the ultimate analysis of when we do ultimate analysis into the nature of things, but they still do exist by way of designation. As it is taught by Master Nagarjuna himself in another chapter where he says, because things are empty because of dependent origination. So, of course, that in the third chapter, so we with our senses, like the visual consciousness, auditory consciousness, olfactory consciousness, and our taste, bud, and so forth. And of course, there are these objects that are experienced, the visual objects, the sounds, the smell, and taste, as well as texture, and then mental objects. So they do appear to as if they have objective existence from their own sides. And so the question or the objection, since you have clearly shown that going is impossible, my mind rejoices in hearing about emptiness. Therefore, now the time has come to teach more of your texture system. More of your system, we shall do just that. And then vision, hearing, smelling, tasting, and so forth. Vision and so on are taught to be the six sense faculties, while their object fields are to be shown to be the six objects, such as visible form and so forth. And so if it were accepted to state it is vision, since it sees visible form, then sense base would exist. Basis would exist, but that is impossible. Why is that? The Master, it is said, vision does not see itself at all. If it does not see itself, how could it see others? So of course, with our eyes, we see objects, but the eye does not look at itself. So if the intrinsic nature of things were seen in themselves, then it would be observed in others as well, since they possess that nature. For example, if you observe moisture in water, then you may also observe it in the earth, since it can possess moistness. And if you saw hotness in the fire, then you may also observe it in water, since it can possess hotness. So what these are saying, that if looking or seeing things is something, an action which is done without dependence on others, then these logical fallacies would, you would have these logical fallacies. So vision and so on are established in the same manner as fire. For example, though fire burns, it burns others and does not burn itself. So too, though vision sees, it sees others and does not see itself. Whereas once the example of fire is inadequate for the establishment of vision. The term inadequate ultimately means incapable or insufficient. The example of fire formulated by you is inadequate for the establishment of vision. Why is that? Indeed, because in this world it is said that fuel is burned and fire ceases to exist when separated from its fuel. Therefore, fire burns itself and does not burn others. And so forth. And then moreover, specific proof must be declared. And Master Aryadeva states, fire, which is by nature hot, burns. But how could that which is not hot burn? And so forth. So that being so, the example of fire is inadequate. In this regard, if something that fire illuminates both, then this also is inadequate as a proof, for just as fire would illuminate both itself and others, so too it would burn both itself and others. If someone says that it burns others but it does not burn itself, then how could it be tenable that fire burns others but does not burn itself? And similarly, how could vision see others and not see itself? Again, he may say, why is it not the case that just as fire illuminates itself and others, so too, regarding vision, vision sees both itself and others? For it is said that one sees oneself. So too, on this point, because in the world declare, I myself apprehend myself. But since this expression refers to its own self, the example of fire is inadequate as a proof of establishing vision. Moreover, that together with vision are refuted by where one has gone, not gone, and that being gone over. Together with vision refers to that accompanying vision. What is it? It is the example of fire. This means that both the example and the vision have been refuted in the same manner. By what means have they been refuted? They have been refuted by the examination of where one has gone, not gone, and being gone over, and so forth. So we'll have a break here. Holiness.
Question? No question?
In the first question, in Lamrim Chemo, Tsongkhapa has said that after conceptual understanding of emptiness, one would be able to overcome gross self-grasping. So this is this is mentioned in the Lamrim Chemo. So the question is whether this refers to the spontaneous self-grasping or the fabricated, or rather grasping of the self due to mental fabrications. So His Holiness says the fabricated self-grasping, these are overcome during the initial stages of the meditation on emptiness, like during the path of accumulation and path of preparation. But the spontaneous self-grasping, this is very subtle. That has come down from beginning of lifetimes,
nature is
and so they need to
why
be
is it
overcome
so hard
by
doing
like
the compassion
from higher
thing
stages,
when
like
it
the
is
first
called
ground, second
upon?
ground, like that. The second answer, I missed the question. I will try to do that later. During childhood, mother gives care and love to the child by smiling and showing kindness. And then at the same time, if the mother shows is a little bit stern and simultaneously. Now the children, they play, when they are playing among themselves, they don't talk about what religion they are from or what race they are from, like that. So this shows that these distinctions are more fabricated, more or less fabricated later on in life. They are not spontaneously there. As one grows up, one then gradually picks up these designations like religious background, racial background, cultural backgrounds, like that. For example, in Texas, recently there was a big flood problem, and also in in Bangladesh, there was small similar flood. Now, when a person is being washed away by flood water, now if someone else sees a person being carried away by flood water, the person wouldn't think whether that person belongs to which religion or what nationality he is from, like that. The immediate instinct is to try to save that person. So these things come later on. So what happens is as we grow up, due to our the education we are given, these minor secondary differences are more emphasized, and our basic commonality that is being ignored. So like for example in the past in Europe, like there's this distinction between French, German, European, like that. But then afterwards, as they gradually time passed, this sense of European Union came about, and and the former conflicts subsided. Now, if the European Union had not been established, it is very likely that there would have been infightings in Europe within the European countries. The 6 or 7 billion human beings, we have to live together as a global community because we are all human beings. So what's lacking is somewhere in our educational system, there's a problem. There's need for more education, which is emphasized more on the commonality, the sameness, the human, community, our human world. And with the absence of that, our spontaneous brotherhood feeling is sort of put under the ignored, and then the differences are more emphasized, and that's how problems arise. So our education, system of education, should be sort of needs modification through. So on this small planet Earth, whether we are happy or suffering, we live together. For example, if there's an epidemic in one part of the world, and famine like that, it becomes a universal problem. Next question.
Economics and political science, and interested in how Buddhist philosophy tackles big questions in political philosophy. What do you believe is the best way to distribute property?
I'm socialist. And even furthermore, as far as social economy is concerned, I am Marxist. So, you see, the equal distribution in the Marxist economy, equal distribution, and also the emphasis, right of working class people. I think these are, I think, the Marxist economy is related with moral principle, whereas capitalism only think money, making money. So, socialist economic theory, much better. But former Soviet Union, and now China also, the socialist country, but actually huge gap rich and poor. Some time back, the former president of Israel, one of Nobel laureate, Shimon Peres, wonderful. His English accent a little difficult, but he is really knowledgeable person, a wonderful person. As a Nobel laureate, there's a few occasions we come together and talk. So in the past, in the previous, you see, he the more sort of positive attitude towards the Chinese communist, because he socialist, he fully support about socialist countries. And after a few years, one occasion we met. Then I asked him, "What now, China? Socialist?" He immediately said, "No, no longer genuine socialist country." Capitalist, he mentioned to me, like that. Nowadays, why the people try to sort of say the emphasis, importance of equal distribution, but not implemented fully, and then huge gap and corruption. These things have – why? Lack of moral principle. So system will not change our mind. Only awareness, the self-centered attitude, is ultimately harmful to oneself, and taking care about the well-being of others, ultimately you get maximum benefit. So unless change here, the system, as I mentioned earlier, is not very, we will not be because of the guaranteed way, like that. Next question.
What is the ultimate purpose for practicing meditation? And what is the benefit of meditation for younger generation people of today's time? Meditation practice like Vipassana and Shamatha, these are common to non-Buddhist traditions, Hindu traditions. So these are practiced. The aim and goal of doing these, engaging in these practices, are slightly different from in different traditions. In the Buddhist tradition, if one's purpose of meditation is to for one's own liberation, then of course the ultimate goal is liberation from samsara. In the Bodhisattva Yana system, these practices are done primarily for the elimination of the obscuration of knowledge. So the purpose or the goal differs from system to system. And now for those people who don't have much particular interest in religion, but are interested in meditation, now whether you call yourself a Dharma practitioner or not religious person or not, main purpose is to lead a happy life. Just like I said previously, we need, just like we need a healthy physical body, we need a hygienic, good, happy mental hygiene.
Effective to our mind. Anger come, suspicion come, jealousy come. You cannot enjoy peace of mind. While your mind, too much anger, too much negative emotion. So even, I think you enjoy best tea, best food, you may not feel happy. Even I think a normal tea, normal food, when your mind peaceful, then even not high quality, but you feel, oh, very good. If your mind a little bit agitated, then best food come. So therefore, taking care about our physical, hygiene of physical, as much as we should take care about our emotion. This is nothing to do with religion. Then anyone who pay more attention about our inner value, then various different religious traditions have, you see, they more or less same potential to help, to maintain peace of mind, to increase peace of mind, and use different philosophy like that. So then those people who just because they're not much interested about religion, then okay. No need to become a religious person. But we should take care about your mind, your emotion. That's important.
The question is, I am a staff and a business person. So as a business person and a staff in my office, I tried my best to improve my moral life. And the answer is, your action is very good. Just like I said, from your side, you try to help people and be kind to other people. Simultaneously, it's important to discuss with other people about the hygiene of one's mind. That would be helpful. Small kids, they have pure mind. But the society today is, some aspects are very negative, some are good. So how to make them progress in the good side? So that's His Holiness said. As I said before, mothers, parents' love and care and giving proper education to the child are very important, especially parents spending more time with their children. For example, breastfeeding by the mother. For example, families, those parents who are a little bit financially better off, they give sort of manufactured milk to their child. These are not really good. As scientists are saying this, they are saying that as after a child's birth, as the child grows up, the child goes through different stages of by the months, and the body needs different levels of different kinds of ingredients, nutrients. These are there in the mother's milk in a natural way. So therefore, real mother's milk and breastfeeding is extremely important, and spending more time, giving more time to one's child, and most importantly, how you are going to educate your child, especially today, the state of the education.
To bring compassionate people, compassionate community.
And it sort of has a detrimental effect on the child later on in their life.
In Dharamsala for 4 days, we can feel the ray of compassion radiating from almost all the Tibetan residents in Dharamsala. Therefore, we wonder how we could cultivate the culture of compassion and cultivate the practice of loving kindness to our people.
Tibetan, before Buddhism came, that means I think before 7th century and 8th century. Before that, we Tibetan quite warrior. Carry sword and spear, like ancient Mongol or in Central Asia, like that. Mainly nomad. So it's a nomad, no particular place, and from time to time go different place with sword. And whenever you find some sort of opposition, crash. then eventually Buddha Dharma come. I think start 7th century. Then the serious sort of, the study these things start 8th century. The 8th century Tibetan master, the Tibetan emperor Trisung Tezin, he invited at that time one of the best Nalanda master, Shantarakshita, he invited. So Shantarakshita introduced Buddha Dharma according to Nalanda tradition. Nalanda tradition, as I mentioned earlier, use a lot of sort of investigation, not just a belief, not just faith. So then gradually, you see, among Tibetan, there were many scholars, good practitioners, with fuller knowledge. So gradually, some impact to the society. So in Tibet, eventually, we create some kind of Buddhist culture, non-violent, compassionate, like that. So that makes differences. Generally, many Chinese tourists from mainland China visit Tibet. Usually, you see, they found, very nice Tibetan people, very nice, in spite of difficult circumstances. They say that. And a number of tourists come here, Dharamsala. See, some of them, when I met, they told me, they spent a few days or few weeks in Dharamsala. They found the most sort of enjoyable sort of period, time. Of course, this Dharamsala facility nowadays better, but otherwise, facility not very good. Particularly toilet, you have to go in the forest. So, so you also, give some dana, some generosity to some mosquito or some insect. But people, really, many people, express to me, they really enjoy here. I think we, Tibetan community, generally speaking, of course, some Tibetan quite a negative. But overall, I think high percentage, more compassionate, more jovial, like that. I think that's our culture through centuries. Next.
When Jesus gave up his life for the sake of all sentient beings, is this action bodhicitta?
We can say most of these great sort of teachers on human history, world history, from Buddhist viewpoint, we can say some of them, they really, the practitioner of Bodhisattva. They taught different philosophical views because it suits the local people. I think different part of the world, due to different climate, different temperature, different way of life. So naturally, different cultural heritage, different mental different mental disposition. So therefore, the teaching of compassion, love, should use through different concept or different philosophical views. To some people, yes, concept of creator is very, very powerful. And for that, just one life. This very life created by God. So we have direct link with God. So very powerful to develop the enthusiasm. Oh, I must follow God's path, God's message. That's love. No need complicated philosophy. And the Buddhist philosophy, in particularly Nalanda philosophy, Nagarjuna's philosophy, very complicated. And then on top of that, life after life. So the reality, according to Buddhist explanation, a lot of sort of cause of complication, like that. So certainly, you see these, I think just ordinary person, I think from Buddhist viewpoint, you see, cannot sort of say, cannot or teaching. Eventually, millions of people follow that and get a benefit. So these appears something different, but the reality, these great people, great teacher, I think some kind of sort of manifestation of it's a higher being. I feel like that. Okay, now next.
His Holiness gives teaching, and we listen to His Holiness teachings, but sometimes we sort of miss out, but we don't understand Tibetan, and so So does that mean that we are able to receive the transmission when His Holiness is teaching? His Holiness says, yes, you will receive the transmission because you will hear the sound. There's a saying that if you listen to a transmission of a teaching, even if you cannot understand the meaning, if you just listen to the sound, you will receive the transmission. So that's not a problem. And anyway, what can you do if you sort of cannot understand Tibetan? Next question is on this, how to. I think the question is about how to get born in the Pure Land. His Holiness says, I don't know much. Usually we do prayers of the Pure Land to get born in the Pure Land. And but what is important is before you get born in the Pure Land, where you are right now, it's better to make that a Pure Land. So make whatever is good, you should enjoy, and that is don't make yourself sort of unhappy and go through sort of experience suffering in this life. So you should practice method and wisdom as genuinely and sincerely, and you will definitely be able to transform your mind, and you will be happier, and your physical body, your body will be you will have better health. But as of course, when you age, the body will decline a little bit. That is something beyond our control. Now, some people who are very highly realized through practice, they have certain control over their the body. That is a different, special case. So, the main thing is if you can maintain a calm, tamed, and peaceful mind, that is the main source of happiness and peace. And especially, secondly, Naga Buddhi, Nagarjuna's heart son, is an important disciple. Naga Bodhi, I think he's called Naga Bodhi Lujang. He has said in his one of his commentaries that the people in this world, due to their physical aggregate, they have this capability to practice the drops, winds, and energies. And this is something that lacks in those in the heavenly realms, those beings who live even in the Pure Land. Because even in the Pure Land, because the aggregates are slightly different, they cannot do that practice in the Pure Land. Whereas this can be done only in the world as human beings due to the unique physical aggregate we possess.
Then last question.
Any one last question?
How to prepare our mind while engaging in daily activities, using emptiness, and at the same time practicing kindness and compassion, and not fall into the traps of mental afflictions.
I think more at the beginning. I think more about altruism. It's much easier. And then for that, then for Buddhist practice, then in order to develop the sort of infinite love, infinite altruism, and aiming Buddhahood, then the understanding about shunyata very important. But for the time being, shunyata, not easy. You need years study these texts. So the purpose, I give this teaching, not some kind of hope. You once hear these things, develop understanding of shunyata, impossible. But develop some kind of interest in your mind, some kind of feeling of familiar about shunyata. Then you must pay serious attention, read more text, and study. So it may take 1 decade or 2 decades, 3 decades, then gradually your understanding about shunyata then will become more, deeper, like that. Like that. Yeah. Okay.
I think we are at page 53. 33, sorry. 33. Okay. So I will read through this line. In fact, your statement, it is vision, since it sees visible form, attributes the condition of the action to the agent such that it is vision since it sees. Therefore, it is vision when it sees, but it is not vision when it does not. But if you imagine the fault of there being two actions of seeing is untenable, since something is vision, since it sees, because vision itself possesses the action of seeing, then in response, the Master says, vision does not see. If you imagine that vision sees, then this is illogical, because sees does not possess the action of seeing. But if you think that it is untenable that this error arises, and therefore that sees possess this action of seeing, then in response, non-vision does not see. Page 34. As such, on this point, vision that lacks the action of seeing would not be vision. In that regard, how could that which is not vision see? That is untenable, for how could non-vision see? But if he does not see, even your fingertip would see, but it does not see. That being so, it is also untenable to say non-vision sees. Objection. The condition of the action refers to the action and does not refer to the agent. Due to this, it may be asked, if it is vision, it sees, since it sees, then what then sees? The answer is, it is the seer. Response. One should understand that the seer is explained in the same way as vision. It was said, vision does not see itself at all. If it does not see itself, how could it see others? The statement that it is vision it sees has already been refuted, and just this refutation of vision is the refutation of the seer. Why is that? Why is that? Here, no alternate explanation is required, because these words rebut the assertion the I is a seer and absolutely negate this assertion that the self is a seer. Whether vision is considered to be the seer or the self is considered to be the seer, the reason refuting either is the same. Here, there is another fault. If the seer sees with his vision, in consequence, there would be three seeings. Objection. What use it is for one to say vision sees or the seer sees? Vision with which one sees existent entities such as a vase or a cloth does exist. Response. Are you guideless and confused in the wilderness, or do you assert that objects of seeing and vision exist without a seer? There is no seer whether vision exists or not. When there is no seer, how could the objects seen and vision exist? It was earlier stated, here is a seer when he sees, but he is not a seer when he does not see. Therefore, he is a seer because he possesses seeing. But one cannot say the seer sees, because two actions of seeing does not exist. Thus, first, there is no seer, since if vision exists, he is not a seer. Page 35. Now also it is said that he who is not a seer does not see, because he lacks the action of seeing. So too there is no seer if vision does not exist. Though it is tenable that vision either exists or does not exist. When there is no seer, how for you could the object seen and vision exists? Thus something becomes an object seen due to that which sees, but that which sees does not exist. If it does not exist, how then does vision arise? If it does not see, how could there be an object seen? That which sees by any means is vision of something, but that which sees does not exist. If it does not exist, how then does vision arise? If it does not see, how could there be an object seen? If it sees and there is no seer, then the object seen and the vision are untenable. Therefore, sense basis do not exist. Objection. Sense basis exists. Why? Because consciousness exists. Thus, a consciousness which observes object exists. Because consciousness exists, sense basis also exists. Response. Because the object seen and the vision do not exist, the four such as consciousness do not exist. How then could grasping and so on come to exist? It has been explained that when there is no seer, then the objects seen and vision are untenable. At that time, how could consciousness exist? So too, apart from the object seen, what would consciousness observe? If vision does not exist, how then, without relying upon it, could consciousness come to exist? But if it did, it would even exist for the blind, but it doesn't. That being so, if the objects seen and vision do not exist, consciousness is impossible and its existence untenable. If consciousness does not exist, how could contact, sparsha, exist? If context does not exist, how could feeling exist? If feeling does not exist, how could craving exist? Similarly, how could grasping exist? Grasping, existent, birth, aging, and death exist also, or death also exists. Therefore, sense bases do not exist. Yeah, the Kaulis. 35 Delis. The Bhagwan also stated, noble Shravakas. So His Holiness says, things exist to us as if they are existing inherently, but if they do exist as they appear, in Ratnavali, Aryadeva has said that things are like illusions, like a mirage. If that is so, and if things are really like inherent, then if you analyze, they should become more and more solid. But it is not the case. The more you analyze in the ultimate analysis, they disintegrate. They lose their identity and entity. So therefore, everything is nominal, merely designated, just mere names, like mirage. The Bhagwan, now back to the text. The Bhagwan also stated, so His Holiness says, since things do exist, things appear to us as if they exist inherently, and then we hold to that, and then goes into action, and that's how afflictive emotions arise, such as desire, hatred, and so on. Back to the text, the Bhagwan also stated, page 35 at the bottom, noble Shavakas, visible from that is the object of eye consciousness that occurred in the past, that will occur in the future, and that occurs in the present is not in any way permanent, nor stable, nor suchness, nor undifferentiated suchness, nor non-erroneous suchness. Such illusion exists, the projection of such. So when we hear a sound, an inherent sound, in reality, there's an empty space, there's sound, and the ear organ, and then this brain is also involved, and all these together plays up, and we're able to hear. So same thing applies to looking at a sub-object, seeing. It is a combination of many different factors, as a result of which one is able to see something. So many different factors come together to make something happen. Page 36, response. Understand hearing, smelling, taste, touch, and the mental faculty, the hearer and the object heard, and so on, in accordance with the explanation of vision. The Buddha, His Holiness says, he taught about the aggregates, etc. These are there. So the text says, understanding, hearing, and so on. In accordance with this explanation, how then should they be explained? In accordance with the explanation of vision, understand what was untenable for vision when comprehensively analyzed also applies to hearing and so on. Understand what was untenable for the seer also applies to the hearer and so on. Understand what was untenable for a visible object also applies to an audible object and so on. If this is done, you will understand how emptiness is established for the same basis. This completes the third chapter called Examination of Basis. So, His Holiness says the five elements and the results of the five elements. Now, if you analyze the five elements, they are very subtle. What we see are the product of the five elements, like form. For example, how can the form exist inherently? So next we are on chapter 4, page 37. Form separates from the cause of form is not observed. If the four great elements are said to be the cause of form, and form is said to be their effect, then form that is separate from the form, four great elements would exist, yet there is no resultant form that is distinct from the four great elements. Thus form is untenable. Objection. First, the primary elements exist because the cause of form exists. Since the effect also exists, form is actually established. Response. A cause of form separate from form is not seen. Something that is separate from form but said to be the cause of form is not seen. It has already been mentioned that form is untenable, and because such form is untenable, so too the cause of form is untenable. Objection. You deny the effect in dependence on a cause, and you deny the cause in dependence on an effect. Therefore, in dependence upon what do you deny the other? But some do exist, and if one exists, then the other also is established. Response. You cannot say that the other exists. Why? In this case, if form were separate from the causes of form, it would follow that form is without a cause. But there is no object anywhere that is without a cause. If an effect exists, even though it exists, its cause had been eliminated, then at that time it would be causeless. But no object anywhere has been seen or shown to be without a cause. Otherwise, it would absurdly follow that everything would be eternally arise from everything, and the causal process would be pointless. Moreover, when form exists, I'm jumping a little bit to catch up. Sometimes I have to skip some sections. Moreover, when form exists, the cause of form is not possible. When form, page 38, when form does not exist, the cause of form is not possible. When you examine the cause of form, either you examine it when form exists or otherwise where form does not exist. But when form exists, the cause of form is not possible, and when form does not exist, it is also not possible. First, when form exists, it is impossible for what would its cause be once it exists. But even when it exists, if the action of its cause were required, then such action would never not be required. But this cannot be accepted, for when form exists, the cause of form is impossible. And also, when form does not exist, the cause of form is impossible, for when form does not exist, what would it be the cause of? That being so, when form does not exist, the cause of form is also not possible. Indeed, this has already been clearly explained in the refutation of conditions. Conditions are not tenable for a non-existent or existent object. Moreover, this is again repeated here, that form exists without a cause is untenable and not possible. Spontaneously arisen from that does not exhibit a cause is not possible and untenable. Why? Because otherwise it would absurdly follow that everything would eternally arise, and the fault occur that the causal process would be pointless. That being so, frequently emphasized that one should hold the view that causelessness is untenable and impossible because it is totally defective. Therefore, one should never fabricate conceptions about form. Because in fact, form is not observed apart from the cause of form. The cause of form is impossible whether form exists or not, and form without a cause is untenable, impossible. It is fitting that those endowed with wisdom such as yours, who desire to comprehend reality, should never fabricate conceptions about form. How then could it be fitting to hold such opinions about things which are not established? Moreover, in what way? Now he's talking about the product of the five elements. In that way, the nature primary element is taught to be solidity, liquidity, heat, and mobility. Yet these qualities with the primary elements are not observed in form. Therefore, because we observe solidity in earth, liquidity in water, heat in fire, and mobility in wind, the effect is not similar to the cause, nor is the cause similar to the effect. Thus, it is not possible to say that form is the effect. Feeling, discernment, formation, and mind, as well as all things in every respect, are just the same as form itself. Feeling, discernment, formation, and consciousness are impossible in just the same way as a form is impossible. And just as form does not exist separate from the primary elements, so too feeling does not exist separate from contact. Just as the cause of form does not exist separate from the form, so too contact does not exist separate from feeling. Page 40. Aditya Bandhu also stated, form is like a mass of froth, feeling is like bubbles, discernment is like a mirage, formation is like a plantain tree, and consciousness is like an illusion. Form that comprises one temporal component of aggregate is impossible, and so too the remaining aggregates are impossible. Not only that, just as form is impossible, so too all phenomena are impossible. Thus, now it comes to this point saying form is emptiness. Form is empty, which comes in the Heart Sutra, and which does not mean form, there is no form. The form, it just means form does not exist inherently, and they arise due to causes and conditions. And there's no independent form, and so you cannot say, therefore you can infer that there's a form which is independent of cause and conditions. So the meaning of emptiness is directly related to the meaning of dependent arising. If things exist inherently, then they need not. They don't require causes and conditions. So this is the meaning of causes. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not separate from form. Form is not separate from emptiness. Back to the text, page 40. In the middle, thus because phenomena are untenable since form is untenable. Therefore, when debate is made in terms of emptiness, they may utter various refutations, but all their responses are not a refutation. They are identical to the point yet to be proven. So, to those who preach the philosophy of emptiness, they become like irrefutable. No one can sort of refute such a position. So this is what is being explained in these lines. When debate is made in terms of emptiness and there's no discussion, there's discussion arguing against it. Such refutations speak in terms of what is not emptiness. But at that time, all such responses are not refutations. Why? Because they are identical to the point that is yet to be proven. Thus, by way of an example, in order to demonstrate an example to establish the proposition all things are by nature empty, one may establish the proposition by stating cloth is by nature empty. Then to establish, one may add thread that is the cause of cloth exists. But this is identical to the point that is yet to be proven. Any proof that demonstrates that the cloth is by nature empty also fully establish that thread. Its cause is also empty. Therefore, because of the demonstrating that thread, its cause is not empty, is identical to the cloth not being empty, that is yet to be proven. In the same way, beings who understand the nature of Dharma think the nature of virtuous Dharma is virtue, and the rest should be ascertained in the same way. And they also state that this. And if virtuous Dharmas also are empty by nature because they are dependently originated, and it is identical to that yet to be proven, because it is identical to that yet to be proven, it cannot be refuted. Master Aryadeva also stated, Seeing one thing is seeing all. The emptiness of one is the emptiness of all. When explanations are given in terms of emptiness, they may utter various criticisms, but all their responses are not true criticisms. They are identical to the point yet to be proven. When explanations are given of things lacking any nature in terms of emptiness, all such criticisms due to denying emptiness as before are identical to the point yet to be proven. They are not criticisms, for they are identical in the meaning. But we have shown this in a specific different context. These two verses should be regarded as included in every chapter because they are established universally. This completes the fourth chapter called Examination of Aggregates. Page 42. Buddhapalita's commentary on Nagarjuna's Middle Way, Chapter 5, Examination of Elements. Objection. In this chapter, the 6 elements, such as earth and so on, are taught, and their individuals' defining characteristics are also taught. The defining characteristics of space is non-obstruction, but since it is unreasonable to teach that non-things have defining characteristics, space exists because it is defining characteristics. Just as space exists, so too the remaining elements exist because their defining characteristics exist. Response. The defining characteristics of space are impossible. Why is that? Because space does not exist in the least prior to the characteristics of space. If so-called space were to exist in some measure prior to the defining characteristics of space, it would be reasonable to point to this or that as the defining characteristics of space. But space does not exist prior to the defining characteristics of space. Therefore, how could it be tenable to speak of the defining characteristics of space if space does not exist? If you consider that prior to the defining characteristics of space, space exists, then in that case, if something exists prior to its characteristics, it would absurdly follow it has no characteristics. Objection. But something without defining characteristics exists. Response. A thing without characteristics has never existed anywhere. The term any means ever. A thing without defining characteristics has never existed, nor is it taught in any textual system. Thus, it is reasonable to declare, if a thing without characteristics does not exist, to what it would its characteristics be applied? In this case, characteristics do not apply to those without characteristics. Page 43. Because things without defining characteristics have never existed before. Therefore, if things without defining characteristics do not exist, it is not tenable that defining characteristics are applied to a non-existent basis. But if you think that characteristics apply to things that possess defining characteristics, then it is in response no to those with characteristics. Also, it is tenable. It is not tenable that defining characteristics apply to things with defining characteristics because things do not exist. What use would defining characteristics be to things that are already established in their own defining characteristics? Thus, an infinite regress would absurdly follow, for then things would never be without defining characteristics, and defining characteristics would always apply to them. This also is unacceptable to apply to defining characteristics in that way to things that already possess defining characteristics is untenable. But if you think that such defining characteristics are applied to things other than those with defining characteristics or without defining characteristics, then the master observes, nor do they apply to any other than those with or without characteristics. Excuse me, why is that? Because it is impossible. If those with defining characteristics are not those without defining characteristics, and those without defining characteristics are not with those defining characteristics, then those with defining characteristics and those without defining characteristics form a dichotomy In that case, it is untenable that defining characteristics apply to those with defining characteristics and those without defining characteristics, because this is utterly impossible. When characteristics do not apply, a basis with characteristics is not tenable. When defining characteristics do not apply to a basis, then a basis without defining characteristics is untenable. Thus, though you note that elephants are properly established since they possess defining characteristics, that is untenable because defining characteristics do not apply to those which possess defining characteristics. If they don't, how would a basis of defining those defining characteristics be tenable? Objection. First, defining characteristics exist. For it is due to the existence of defining characteristics that a basis that with defining characteristics is established. Response. If a basis with characteristics is untenable and its characteristics would not exist, page 44, objection. Indeed, one cannot state this is a basis with defining characteristics and this is a defining characteristic. However, at times things do exist. Response. No thing whatsoever exists separate from a basis with characteristics or the characteristics themselves. If anything comes to exist, it is either a basis with defining characteristics or simply a defining characteristics, but that which is neither a basis with defining characteristics nor. So, his Honor says, if you cannot sort of establish, sort of obstruction and touch, then you cannot establish its sort of inherent nature or something like that. Page 44. Objection. But things surely exist. What is that? Why is that? Because non-things exist. You have said that a basis with defining characteristics and the defining characteristics themselves do not exist. But this was said with reference to things. Therefore, since anything references in the statement things of any type do not exist, does exist, does things exist because non-things exist? Response. Well said. If non-things exist, then also things would exist. How could things exist? Things exist since non-things do not exist. In what way? The Master says, if a thing does not exist with respect to what it be a non-thing, previously it was said, no thing whatsoever exists separate from a basis with characteristics or the characteristics themselves. If that does not exist, you should investigate how it could be your non-thing. Page 45. As such, it is the non-thing of a thing. And if a thing does not exist with respect to what would be a non-thing, that being so, non-thing do not exist because things do not exist. Objection, there are those who understand things and non-things, and those who investigate things and non-things. Since such beings exist, things and non-things are properly established. Response. Things and non-things have contradictory properties. Who then understands things and non-things? Contradictory phenomena refer to opposing phenomena. For contradictory phenomena to those things and non-things are contradictory phenomena regarding things and non-things. What are the contradictory phenomena to those things and non-things? They are those that are not things. With regard to space, there are things called obstruction and touch. But if you analyze, you cannot find them. No, it doesn't. They don't. Like same thing with color and shape. If you analyze, you cannot find them. It is said that if the thing exists, it has parts, and there's nothing that has that is no parts. So page 45 in the center. Therefore, space is not a thing, nor a non-thing, nor a basis with characteristics, nor a characteristic itself. Therefore, it is this investigated, neither a basis with characteristics, and the characteristics of themselves do not exist, nor things that are other than a basis with characteristics, and characteristics themselves exist. If things do not exist, then non-things do not exist. Therefore, space is not a thing. Also, it is not a non-thing. It is not a basis with characteristics, nor even a characteristics itself. In that case, if anything is called space, called space existed, it would not be different from those four, since even those four do not exist. Therefore, space is non-existent. The other five elements are also are the same as space. So same as space means they are the same as space. They are the same as space. For what space is investigated, it is not a thing. It is not a non-thing. It is not a basis with characteristics. It is not a non-characteristics itself. Therefore, so-called space is none of these. So too, any of the five aggregate elements, such as earth, are not things. They are not non-things. They are not a basis with characteristics, and they are not characteristic themselves. Page 46. Since things have neither existed, therefore elements do not. So if we don't analyze and just take things as they appear, like for example, life from past life to this life and this life to, so we consider it is. That's why some schools hold. Many schools hold that the mind stream is eternal. Sort of consistent, permanent, because it never stops. But in Buddhist tradition, we are also faced the same question, but the answer differs. The mind stream does continue forever, but it is inherently empty. And dependent origination, mind stream continues. Relative. So the Buddha declared in the text 46, page 46, Katyayana, the world holds to two states, for in general it holds to existence or non-existence. Therefore I say that due to the dependent origination, the aggregates and so on are free of fault of existence and non-existence. I declare that they are not annihilated and not permanent, but I do not say they don't exist. That being so, it is not pointless to teach Dhamma in terms of aggregates, elements and bases. Those of little intelligence view things as existence or non-existence. They do not see what should be seen, that which is fully pacified and peaceful. Those with little intelligence, whose eye of intelligence obscured, do not comprehend supremely profound dependent originations. Since they view things as existence or non-existent, and they view them as annihilated or permanent. Therefore, they do not see what should be seen, Nirvana, that is fully pure, pacified and peaceful, thus revealing Dhamma in Tibet. So, His Holiness says, so since things do not exist inherently, inherent nature cannot be found, everything exists on the basis of designation, or now as names, mere names, because otherwise we cannot. Otherwise, there's no way things can exist. Okay, page 48, chapter 6. Objection. You have taught the emptiness of aggregates, elements, and bases, and I wish to hear about emptiness. Therefore, it is now appropriate to investigate attachment in someone with attachment. Response. We shall do just that. Holiness. Please, digomadige. Ara nga togo naske. Nga togo desnas. Togo naske.
We're on chapter 6. So, objection, you have taught the emptiness of aggregates, elements, and bases, and I wish to hear more about emptiness. Therefore, it's now appropriate to investigate attachment in someone with attachment. Response, we shall do just that. And so, with regard to attachment, so which is the emotion, and then the person who is obsessed with that is called the one with attachment. The refutation of attachment, and someone with attachment has been taught in various contexts. And so again here the logic that is used earlier with regard to action, agent, and the acted upon object, that same logic applies. Also the logic that fully pacifies attachment has been taught, but if they do not exist, then it is logical to teach the reasoning that fully pacifies them. If you are not bitten by a snake, mantra and medicine are not so are of no use. That being so, attachment and someone with attachment exists. Response: attachment and someone with attachment are impossible. In what way? The master declares: if prior to attachment, someone with attachment is without attachment, attachment with would exist in dependence on that. If someone with attachment exists, then attachment exists. If prior to there being attachment, someone with attachment transforms from being without attachment to being attachment, then attachment would come to exist in dependence on that person having attachment. Why is that? If someone with attachment exists, then attachment exists. Thus, if someone with attachment exists, it would be tenable to say this also is his attachment. If someone is with attachment did not exist, then whose attachment would it be? Thus, since attachment is untenable when there is no basis with attachment, then therefore attachment is untenable if someone with attachment does not exist. If someone with, so then the critic, if someone with attachment exists, attachment exists. And the response: even if someone with attachment exists, how would attachment come to be? But even for you, if someone with attachment exists, how would attachment itself come to be? In that case, what use is the action of attachment to someone already with attachment? If he does not act as someone with attachment, how could attachment arise? But if it did not, if it did arise, how would he would never not have attachment? Therefore, even if someone is with attachment exists, attachment would not be tenable. Objection. First, someone with attachment exists, and since someone with attachment would not arise if there were no attachment, attachment is fully established. So between the person with attachment and the attachment, so whether attachment exists or not, analysis is the same for someone with attachment. If you thoroughly investigate whether someone with attachment exists, then whether attachment exists or not for someone with attachment, attachment is completely untenable, and the analysis is the same. Why is that? If prior to someone with attachment, attachment exists for someone without attachment, someone with attachment would exist in dependence on that. If attachment exists, then someone with attachment exists. If prior to there being someone with attachment attachment transforms someone without attachment into someone with attachment, then someone with attachment would exist independent on that. Why is that? If attachment exists, then someone with attachment exists. But thus, if attachment exists, it would be tenable to say that this is someone with attachment. If attachment did not exist, how would he become someone with attachment if he's a person without attachment? At the end of page number 49, objection, neither attachment nor someone with attachment exists in temporal sequence. For these two arise simultaneously. Response, it is not that attachment and someone with attachment arise simultaneously. It is not tenable that attachment and someone with attachment arise simultaneously. Why is that? For then attachment and someone with attachment would be mutually independent. If attachment and someone with attachment were to arise simultaneously, attachment and someone with attachment would be mutually independent. If that were so, it would not be tenable to say this is his attachment, and due to this he is someone with attachment. If these expressions do not exist, then attachment would not be tenable, and also someone with attachment would not be tenable. Thus, if attachment is that which excites someone with attachment, and someone with attachment is one who is excited by attachment, then it is tenable that they are simultaneously arisen states which are mutually independent. Therefore, it is illogical that attachment and someone with attachment arise simultaneously. Moreover, the attachment and someone with attachment that is said by you to be coexistent as either the same or different is in this regard. It says, a single thing is not coexistent. First, if something is single, it is not tenable that it is coexistent. Why is that? It is not coexistent with itself. Here, that called a single ox is just one thing and refers to one ox. But how could that single ox be coexistent with just that single ox itself? Therefore, if something is a single thing, being coexistent is untenable. Objection but if they are different, they would be coexistent. Response, but how could they be coexistent if they are different? If it is untenable, there is something which is single, which is a single thing is coexistent. How could different things be coexistent? Thus, if different things that are incompatible are coexistent, then how could those two incompatible states exist together as one? Therefore, even though they are indifferent, it is not tenable, they are coexistent. But even if you consider this to be untenable, but consider attachment and someone with attachment to be coexistent, then we shall also respond to this. If a single thing were coexistent, it would be coexistent even without a companion. If different things were coexistent, they would be coexistent even without a companion. Now, if attachment and someone with attachment was a single thing but coexistent, then in that case, it would be coexistent even without a companion. How is that? Here, one refers to a single thing, and a single thing called one ox or one horse refers to an ox and a horse. Wherever a single thing exists, also coexistent would exist, and it would follow that a single ox or a single horse would coexist even without a companion. As such, considering this to be coexistent would be pointless. Objection, difference does not exist in oxen, nor does it exist in horses, but coexistence exists for both. Just as union is a shared general result of both. But if difference exists for each and difference is twofold, then things would exist separately without mutual dependence. But this is unacceptable. Therefore, difference exists in two things that coexist. Response. If different things were coexistent, what about attachment and someone with attachment? If they were established as different, these two would be coexistent. Indeed, difference exists between two things. But if you imagine that two different things exist that are coexistent, then in that case, what is established with regard to attachment and someone with attachment, when you imagine it to be so, those two would surely be established as different. If that is the case, those two should be considered to be coexistent because they are established as different things. If attachment and someone with attachment were in fact established as different things, what is the point considering these two to be coexistent? The term in fact, it means definitely. So simultaneity or non-simultaneity cannot be talked about if things were to have any intrinsic independent existence. So, but if you think that attachment and someone with attachment are in fact established as different things, then what is the point of vainly considering these two to be coexistent things? For when they are established as different things, you already assume them to be coexistent things, however, attachment and so forth. So this completes the 6th chapter of, called Examination of the Attachment and Someone with Attachment. May the sublime jewel bodhicitta rise in those who have not taken, in whom it has not yet taken root. May it never decline but increase ever further where it has taken root. So may I never falter even for an instant to uphold the excellent way of the sage, which illuminates the principle of divine origination through all my births, even giving away my body and life. May I spend day and night carefully reflecting, but by what means can I enhance this teaching achieved by the Supreme Savior through strenuous efforts over countless eons? So tomorrow we will do the bodhicitta generation of bodhicitta ceremony, and therefore before you come here in the morning, it would be good to at least go over this principle of altruism. And we talk about all sentient beings, but all sentient beings within this galaxy called the Milky Way, for example, is infinite. And similarly, and therefore, the number of sentient beings is rather infinite throughout the universe. But practically, to whom we can do something to help them achieve happiness and overcome suffering are those of the 7 billion human beings and beings on this planet. And of course, amongst the beings of this planet, Earth, there are those of the animals. And animals, we can't do much for them. We may be able to do some prayers for them, but the 7 billion people on this earth are the ones whom we can actually directly or indirectly, particularly practically, do something to cultivate happiness and overcome suffering. So, of course, you need to put some effort, you need to find means by which you may be able to serve others infinitely, effortlessly, and therefore you should have this determination to become a fully enlightened being, a Buddha, for the benefit of all sentient beings. So if you have Bodhisattvacharya Avatara, of the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, you should go over the first chapter and then the the sixth chapter, and then also the eighth chapter, which the sixth chapter talks about teaches the practice of patience, and which is necessary for the practice and cultivation of bodhicitta, which is taught in the eighth chapter. And so use these texts to reflect on bodhicitta and have this determination to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings before coming here